Welcome back to everyone. Today, Be'ezrat Hashem Nidda, we are going to start part 1 in Taharat Bayit, in Halachot Nidda and Hakatzer. This is the Sefer, one more time, Rabotai, if anybody wants to use it, anybody wants to follow inside with us. Very important, guys, to be able to also take notes. It is a lot of Halachot, as you guys will see. Again, please, if anybody does have any questions, ask your local rabbi if something's not clear. Do not start learning one halakha from another, making things permissible, because this is the biggest mistake a person can ever make. They hear something is mutar over here, something's permissible, and then they start comparing cases where it also could be permissible. No, guys, we don't work like that. Everything has to be brought with proofs and logic and from the Torah. So it's not as simple as we think. So just be careful when you're learning halachot nidda or any other halachot, especially Shabbat, etc. So he says over here, when does a woman become a nidda? Meaning, once a woman sees blood, she becomes a nidda because that's when she's menstruating. He says over here, we're going to speak about the prohibitions of a woman who is a nidda and its severe ramifications to those people that touch a woman who is a nidda, or chas v'shalom if anybody lo aleinu sleeps with a woman who is a nidda. Meaning to say that if a woman saw blood, even if she's in the Shiva Nikim, we'll speak about this B'ezrat Hashem in the 7 clean days, it is forbidden for the husband to touch her, to sleep with her, etc. Even on the same bed, even if they're not touching, even with their clothes, it is forbidden for a woman and a husband to be able to sleep on one bed when she is not clean. When I say she's not clean, does not mean that she stopped seeing blood, but when I say she's not clean, that means she didn't wait the 7 clean days and she still didn't go to the mikvah. As we'll see this halachot as we go along, but people need to know that there are severe ramifications to people that do touch women that are impure. So he says over here, Isha sheyatza dam memkoro. Before I just read this, rule number one, whenever you are dealing to calculate the menstruating cycle of a woman, we need to remember you never follow the non-Jewish calendar. We always have to go by the Jewish calendar, because our day starts from the night, right? The pasuk says, "Vahi erev vahi boker yom echad." There was evening and there was day, and that was the first day. Meaning our day starts literally the night before. So today, Baruch Hashem, today is Tuesday. That means our day literally started last night, meaning Monday night. Okay, Rabbota? And our day will finish literally at sunset when the 3 stars come out. That's when our day finishes and a new day begins for the following day. Just people have to know this. Please go by the Hebrew calendar, etc. That's number one. And number two, guys, whenever we learn to read these halachot, please do not compare one halach to another and to try to allow yourself to do things which you never saw in halakha and you never asked a rabbi, because one of the biggest mistakes a person does do is when they listen to one halakha, they start comparing other halachot. What's the difference? If this is permissible, then this is permissible. When it comes to halakha, it does not work like that. We're dealing with life and death. So a person has to be very, very careful whenever you learn halachot. So if you do have any questions, since you can't ask it back to me, please either ask your local rabbi or ask somebody who be'emet knows this halachot nidda. If anything, if you can't get a hand on, maybe we can try to somehow answer back. But I'll tell you one thing, guys, when you finish the sefer, you will see a lot of your questions will be answered. Just give us some time, because there are many, many details that go into halachot nidda. He begins over here and he says, Isha in halacha aleph, Isha sheyatza dam memkoro. If a woman had blood come out of her source. Over here, whenever we say makor, we mean from the womb where the child is formed. Now, a lot of times a person has a very big misconception. They think that if a woman sees blood, automatically she's impure. That is not the case. The blood that she has to see has to come directly from the source. When I say the source, I mean the uterus, guys, where the child is formed. If the blood does not come from there, that means the woman is not impure. I'll give an example. Sometimes a woman can wipe herself and she might have a scratch from the back. She might have a scratch somewhere over there, so now she's going to see blood. It does not mean that she became impure, because that blood did not come from within her, but that's outside blood, okay? And a lot of times a woman can also have hemorrhoids or other problems. So again, guys, it needs to come from where the makor, where the source is, meaning where the child is formed. If the blood does not come from there, the woman is not impure, before we do continue, whenever you have any questions when it comes to blood, please make sure to ask a rabbi that is able to define the halachot of stains, etc., to allow you to be with your husband. Do not take the law into your own hands. This is one thing you should never do. In any event, he says over here, Isha sheyatzat dam memkora, if a woman had blood that came out from her source, ben bizman shirigla lirot dam veset, whether it was at the time when she was expecting to see the blood of her period, or ben bizman she'en rigla lirot dam veset, or whether it was at the time when she was not expecting to see the blood of her period. Now I want to just try to explain this concept. He concludes and he says, Harehi temeya tum'at nidda. She is impure, she has the impurity of the status of a woman who is impure with nidda. Now just, guys, I made this calendar. I didn't want to use a regular calendar. I do not want people to get confused with what's going on. I just made this calendar. Let's just assume for the argument that this is a Hebrew calendar, whatever month we're in, etc. That the first day starts over here, etc. Now guys, we know that a woman, a regular woman, she has, sometimes you could be with your wife 2 weeks, unless the wife is pregnant. Forget about a pregnant woman right now for a second. If the wife is not pregnant, sometimes she could have, an average woman usually goes about 2 weeks she's with her husband, meaning she can have relations with her husband. 2 weeks she cannot have relations with her husband. But in that 2 weeks, when I say 2 weeks, I don't mean exactly 14 days. There's different halachot, whether it's 4 plus 7 or 5 plus 7, etc. As we'll see this halachot Nidda later on. But I'm trying to tell you that before she begins the other 2 weeks where she's not allowed to be with her husband, meaning the 11 or 12 days, those 2 weeks, guys, there's a day that she begins to see it. And that's when she actually receives the blood. And this is what we want to show you. If a woman, let's say the first 2 weeks, she's allowed to be with her husband, correct? But if she's anticipating the period to come, let's say for example, at the 15th of the month, for example. Now, he's telling us, the Rav David Yosef is teaching us over here, that whether the woman saw blood on these days, whether the woman saw blood on this day when she's expecting it, or whether she saw blood on these days, say she didn't see on this day, but she saw on these days, it does not matter. Whenever a woman sees blood, she becomes tameh. She has the impurity of a nidda. But we got to remember, this blood must come from the source, and we'll see that there's also criteria that have to be met. Be'ezrat Hashem, step by step, we'll try to understand this. So he says over here, Harehi tim'ah tumat nidda. He says over here, she becomes tameh with the status of nidda. V'asur leba'ala lingo ba'a. Very critical. It is forbidden for a husband to touch his wife who is in nidda. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times a person does not realize that they feel that even after the wife stops seeing blood, they have a menopause. Say they reach a certain age where they no longer see blood. But the problem is, if the wife saw blood beforehand, even if she counted 7 clean days, even if she did a hefsek tahara, hefsek tahara literally means where she has to interrupt her cycle and she has to check herself from inside, as we'll see this halachot be'ezrat Hashem later on. And that says that she's tahor, she's pure, meaning she can begin to count 7 clean days. So let's say like this, guys. If a woman, let's say a woman reached the age of 50, I'm just giving you hypothetical situation. A woman reached the age of 50. Now she's menopausing. She no longer sees blood. But before this, she saw blood. Even if she's not going to see blood another 8 years, 10 years, does not matter. The husband is not allowed to touch her. And we'll see over here for sure he's not allowed to sleep with her until she does the hefsek tahara and until she goes to the mikveh after counting 7 clean days. So this is very, very critical, because a lot of men unfortunately feel that once, or maybe they just don't know, that once a woman stops seeing, she's in menopause, so I don't have to worry about anything. No. We have to make sure that she becomes tahor, and then you do not have to worry about anything, as we'll see be'ezrat Hashem b'neder in the halachot to come. Umikol sheken, he says over here, and for sure, shasur lava aleha, it is forbidden for a husband to sleep with his wife at the time when she is a nidda. Ad shetifsok b'tahar, until she stops the count, meaning until she checks herself to make herself tahor. I'll give you an example, guys. Rabotai, this is a tissue, but it's a bad example. The tissue, I should have actually brought an ed. Maybe I'll try to bring a bilined in the next time I try to do the shiur. A woman, usually they have a cloth which is white and it's made out of cotton. It's very smooth, so it shouldn't scratch themselves inside. They take this cloth, they have to put it at the most, her biggest finger, which I guess is the middle finger. And then when she does the bidika, Rabotai, she has to be able to make almost like a horse stance, meaning she has to be able to check herself or sit whichever way is comfortable for her to try to be able to get in there as deep as possible to where the husband's private part reaches. Because she has to try to get all the way in there to see if she's going to be able to get any blood on the ed. It's called the witness. So that's what he's telling us over here. That it is forbidden to touch a woman who is in Nidda. It is forbidden to sleep with a woman who is in Nidda. Until she does a hefsek tahara, she puts this inside herself, right, inside her body, and she makes sure that this tells her that this stops the bleeding, that she's no longer bleeding, and it tells her that she's tahor because she didn't see no blood on the ed, meaning on the cloth with which she checked. V'tispor shivinikim, and she needs to count 7 clean days after she does this checking. V'titbol b'mikvah tahor, and she has to go and she has to dip in a pure mikvah. Why do I have to say pure mikvah? Because a lot of times people think, or women think, that taking a shower is good as a mikvah. Chas v'shalom. That is the wrong way to think about. Showering will never help for a woman. Or women think that they jump into a pool and they can also purify themselves. Again, for that woman, also that will not help for a woman, and it has to be a kosher mikvah. There's a lot of halachot, Be'ezrat Hashem b'li neder, how a mikvah has to be done and how the water has to get there, etc. So he said that she has to go into a kosher mikvah. So therefore, Sheneimar, the pasuk says, Shiv'at yamim tiyeh b'nidata, 7 days you will be in your nidda status. B'nidata tiyeh ad shetavo b'mayim. You're going to be a nidda until you come to the water, meaning until you go ahead and you dip in the mikvah. Rabotai, we're going to conclude over here. Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue with part 2, b'li neder, in the following days. But today we learned a very, very important factor. Halacha number 1 we learned today. A woman does not become tameh unless she sees blood that comes from where the child is formed, which is called the makor, or the source. In English, makor; in Hebrew. Number 2, halacha, we learned, Rabotai, that once a woman sees blood, doesn't matter when she sees blood, once a woman sees blood that came out from the makor, automatically she becomes tameh, and her husband is not allowed to touch her, and how much more so he is not allowed to sleep with her. Number 3, we learned until she's going to do a hefsek tahara, meaning she's going to check herself with a cloth, until she checks her and makes sure that there's nothing on the cloth, and then she's going to be able to count 17 days after that, and Be'ezrat Hashem b'li she'll be able to go to the mikvah, and then she will be permissible to her husband. Guys, there are many, many more halachot. Be'ezrat Hashem b'li we'll get to them one at a time. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen ve'amen.